Antonio Campos, you created, wrote, and directed The Staircase, which is based on the true story of novelist Michael Peterson, who was accused of killing his second wife. Now, the story was previously told in a documentary series. What was your relationship to this case, and how closely did you follow it before making the series?
Well, my journey with it is a long one. It's a little unusual. Basically, I started working on this in 2008 or 9. I was sent the DVDs of the original doc series, which was 8 episodes, in December of 2008. And a producer had the rights, and he was asking if I was interested in adapting it into a feature. And I had just made my first feature at that time. And I watched it, and I knew nothing about it. And I was completely immersed. I mean, at the time, there wasn't anything like this, like where you would watch a documentary for 8 hours, where you would see every side of a case, an investigation, and see the sort of the whole thing unfold until the verdict. And so I was like, this is fascinating. This case is incredible. And what really grabbed me about Michael Peterson, and why I felt like he was such a great character to explore in a mystery, in a true crime story, was that he himself feels like an enigma. So he's like an enigma in the middle of this mystery, he's like a maze within a maze. And that just felt like a really great place to start. And then the other thing that grabbed me was that I was like, this is 8 hours. This was shot over the course of almost 3 years. The people who made this have to be characters, and you have to sort of you have to understand the process of making a documentary. And then I thought, well, if you have to understand that, that becomes part of the storytelling. Like, what is the story that those people are telling? And you're looking at that narrative creation, and then you're looking at the defense forming their narrative, and you look at the prosecution forming their narrative, and you realize, oh, this is all about storytelling. And so, right away, it was like, oh, there's just so many ways of approaching this story that go beyond just the sort of interesting facts of the case that you experience through the documentary.
And you mentioned being approached for a potential feature film. How did it evolve into a limited series over the years? Obviously, you got involved at 2008, and then the story keeps going.
So it's just the way things go in Hollywood sometimes, which is, you start a project, and you really don't know where it's going to take you and how long it's going to take. If someone told me in 2008 that, just give it 10 years and you'll figure it out, you're gonna start making it. And so I was just so into it right away, and I started to develop it as a feature at one place, and they lost the rights, and then I became close with the filmmakers, and then took the rights to another place, set it up there, wrote it there as a feature. And then the story kept changing, like, because in 2008 he was in prison for life. That was the end of the story. Then by 2011 I'm working on my second draft of it, and it's like, oh wait, no, he is out awaiting a new trial. Like, he's been given a retrial. And it was like, well, then that's completely different. And he's now in a relationship with the editor of the documentary. It's like, okay, well, then that's a huge part of the story. So basically the story kept getting more complicated. And then by 2015 or 16, I was like, this is a series. Like, this is never going to be a movie. And at that point I had looked at it from every single angle. So when I got to sort of when I got to sort of trying to imagine it as a series, I had already looked at it from all different angles, and I kind of knew where everybody was at all times, and had explored it in different timelines. So then it was like everything kind of just came together when I started to think of it as a series.
And you mentioned, Michael being an enigma sort of at the heart of it. How tricky is it telling a story where the central character and the central mystery, like, there's no certain answer to it, like, that anyone but yeah, obviously Michael Peterson knows for sure.
It's not tricky. You just have to you have to embrace it. And I like questions, and I like stories that leave me with questions instead of answers. And what we had to sort of identify was, well, this is a mystery, and there are things that we do know. There are things that we can answer. And so along the way, what are those mysteries that we're setting up that we can answer? And try and tell the audience in the storytelling that this is not a story that will give you that big answer. I think it was very clear when we start to explore different possibilities of how she died, that this is not a story that's necessarily going to give you one definitive answer. It's going to explore what could have happened, and in that sort of exploration, better understand the people and the dynamics here, and hopefully leave you with bigger questions about relationships, about dynamics, about people you think and then realize they might be somebody different, and why that is. So it was, in a lot of ways, I think it would seem like it's a hindrance, but if you embrace it, it actually makes for a much more interesting story.
And telling this story over the course of that spans 2 decades, must be kind of challenging from a structural perspective. Like, how did you develop the structure for the series?
Well, it's funny. When I was writing the pilot, I was upstate. I was trying to outline the pilot, and I was really I had the different pieces, but I didn't quite know how, and I knew I was going to play with different timelines. And I remember going on a run. A lot of times I get ideas running, and it's happened a few times where I've gotten ideas running to Enya, and I was running listening to Enya, and it really, the image of Michael in the mirror as an old man getting ready for court to take the Alford plea came to me as the opening, and I knew that then that would kind of come back at the that you would kind of reveal what that was. And I knew that at the end of the pilot, you would go back to that first shot, and you would meet Sophie, the mysterious French woman. And sort of having those bookends in the pilot, when I realized that, everything kind of started to fall into place. And I realized at that point, just like what was so important was just figure out where does each story start and where does each story end. And once I figured that out, it was like sort of trying to figure out how to, fill it in. And at that point, I figured out the pilot, I figured out the structure, and then I got to the writer's room with all these wonderful writers, and we started to sort of really get into the nitty gritty of it all.
And what did you take away from the experience of writing and making this series in terms of like the workings of the legal system, the criminal justice system? What thoughts did you have about that coming away from this?
Well, I mean, it's hard not to be a little disillusioned with the way that things work, because what becomes very, very clear is that ultimately trials are just a competition for who's telling the better story, and not necessarily a search for the truth, which is what you think a trial is. I think, when you're sort of the naive idea of what a trial is, or your initial idea of what a trial is when you first hear about trials or watch a trial. And the idea that it's not necessarily a search for truth and just two sides competing to tell the better story, and then a jury deciding which story they like better. You start to feel like, well, there must be a lot of people telling better stories, but doing it in a way that covers up what the truth is, because a lot of what attorneys are doing is they're being very selective of what facts they put forth and what they kind of hold back, and it's the other side's job to bring those facts in. But what is, what was clear is that in order to sort of really understand the truth of something, you really have to spend a lot of time. If you want to understand the truth of the case, you really have to understand both sides and look at it as objectively as you can, and make up your own mind. And you hope that that's what jury members are doing, and being very careful about how they review all the things that they've heard in testimony and evidence. But that's it. The notion of storytelling is kind of what a trial is about, I think, was the sort of the big takeaway for me, and what I think the audience takes away from the show.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your Writers Guild nomination for the series, and all your work on it. And it's been a pleasure talking with you about it.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much.